Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sultan, and I'm doing this course in collaboration with Sheikh Omar Husain. I'm a licensed professional counselor, alhamdulillah, and I'm really excited for everything that we're going to be delving into together in this course. One of the things that I'm really excited about with regards to this course is that it really delves into the link and the intersection between Islam, psychology, mental health, and therapy. You want to be able to come away from a course like this with a lot of really practical things that you can implement in your life to result in improvements in your daily life.
When we think of Islamic psychology, mental health, a lot of different things may come to mind. So what is the specific approach that we are going to use in this course? Well, first of all, we are approaching it from what's known as positive psychology. In other words, we're not looking at like a disease model. Usually when you go to the doctor, it's like something is broken, let's fix it. While that certainly can be an aspect and is an aspect of mental health, we're going to focus more on kind of what are practical things that someone viewing this course can take and that they can implement in their lives.
So some of the goals of this course, inshallah, are going to be things like, how do I learn how to relate to people in a healthier way? How do I strengthen my relationships while also taking care of myself in them? How can I use mental wellness techniques in order to improve my relationship with others, primarily my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also my awareness of my relationship to myself, who I am, and understanding the core of who I am and how that impacts all of these different facets of my life. You want to be able to leave this course with different techniques that you can use to be able to learn how to control your anger, how to control your responses in different situations, how to learn about different issues that may be plaguing you, but you weren't able to identify, and then how to be able to move forward from them and learn to start healing from them. And then also the idea of how mental wellness and mental health can impact my faith, and how strengthening that part of myself can also strengthen my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well.
We're also going to stress the fact that mental health is for everyone, and it's really about creating a better life for ourselves, and it's about improving connection. That connection includes other people, and ultimately the greatest connection we can have is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this course, first of all, it will increase our iman by knowing our history of mental health in the Islamic world. And I think that's something that we have absolutely no, or I shouldn't say absolutely no, but it's limited. It's only like for specialists, sitting in an ivory tower somewhere. So I think that's really, really important, because to know that means it will make us more comfortable with dealing with mental health in the current society that we live in, because as Muslims, and this is actually true with many minority groups, there's kind of it's taboo. You don't talk about it. We pretend like it doesn't exist, or people say things like, well, I'm not crazy. And so having that background will make people feel more comfortable knowing that this is something which has been going on, for many, many years in our tradition. There's also an element of practical skills, which anyone can implement. You don't have to be a mental health professional to know these skills. And that is going to help in communication. I've taught this course before to various students in different capacities. And they will take some of those skills and like you can start practicing them that week, right? That day when you leave. And so it's going to help in better communication. When we look at a lot of the struggles that we have, whether it's in marital life, whether it's in organizations, it all comes down to communication. Also, it will stress this whole mind, body, soul connection, which we have in Islam. So Islam is not just the intellect is one aspect of the human being. In our society, it tends to be like, let's just make that the only aspect. So it kind of gives a holistic view of the human, because you cannot eliminate the psychological part of them. And so it just gives a different approach to handling our life, and inshallah that will build a stronger connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we are approaching it holistically and not just piecemeal. And then when we get into the taboo topics, so these are topics I have experienced as an imam, working in the community and visiting other communities. Issues like domestic violence or depression or pornography, these are real, they exist, and people don't want to talk about them. So much so that people don't know where to get help. Where do I go if I have a family member that is struggling with one of these things? And people don't have answers. So inshallah, there will be resources provided along with the educational aspects so that inshallah, those that we love, that we are close to, and that we care about can get the help that they need and deserve.
One of the ultimate big picture functions of mental wellness, of understanding our personal psychology, is to be able to transform the way we think about different situations and the way we show up in our lives. Once you have an awareness of the thoughts that go through your mind, once you have an awareness of the way those thoughts are impacting the way you feel, of the way those thoughts are impacting the way you interact with people, the way you interact with your family, the way you show up in different relationships, the way you show up at work, and the way that you interact in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once you have an awareness of that, that's the starting point, and a very powerful starting point in order to be able to change that and improve that, so that once you understand that you struggle with thoughts related to something in particular, you can work to change those thoughts and thereby change every single aspect of the way that you choose to live your lives, especially in terms of your spirituality and your connection with your faith and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether you are somebody who has gone through multiple relationships and it just never was the right one, whether you are a mother of young children and just can't seem to get a rein on your anger in the different situations that come up in your daily life, whether you're somebody who is just really deeply dissatisfied in the way your life is going, whether it's through your job, whether it's through your interactions with your family, but you can't seem to make the decision in terms of how to make that change and you can't see the path forward. Understanding the way that you think and react and deal with different situations can create that starting point to create that meaningful change in your life. Once you start to understand the impact that your thoughts and the way you think about yourself, the way you think about others, the expectations you have of life in general, the way that you interpret the challenges that come your way, once you can get a grasp on that and create an awareness about that, that is a very powerful starting point to be able to transform those thoughts and thereby begin to transform your life for the better, inshallah.
We will also discover the aspect of basically an integrated Islamic psychology model where we are not, we're not just taking Western psychology and just kind of making it like Islamicizing it. We're taking what is beneficial, of course, but the foundation of everything we teach is based off of the Islamic tradition, and which encourages us to improve ourselves in many different aspects. So that, inshallah, is also what we will get. And then understanding mental health from the Quran, the Sunnah, and contemporary psychology, all of those kind of put together. So I am co-teaching this course with Sultan, who is a licensed mental health professional. I will be covering a few different topics. The first topic I will be covering is the history of mental health. So I'll touch on it briefly from the Western perspective, because usually when we think of psychology or counseling or any of that, we're always by default starting with a Western perspective. So I'll briefly touch on that. And then I'll spend quite a bit more time on the Islamic perspective. And that, I think, will really be eye-opening to a lot of us, because usually that's reserved kind of for specialists and researchers. So that will be really, I think that would be really iman boosting to hear to hear the history of kind of psychology or mental health from an Islamic perspective. Then I'll speak about myths around mental health. And I'll just kind of list myth number one. Maybe you've heard of these, but the point is kind of to prepare us to be able to answer some of these myths. And then I will I have a specific set of myths for men because, men, when we look at, again, the research, they tend to be a little bit more hesitant to seek mental health counseling. So we'll go through a section on myths. After that, we'll get into the practical aspects and I'll cover relational skills. So I'll tell you a skill, for example, active listening, and kind of what is the aim and the purpose of it, and then mention some examples from the Islamic tradition, from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And you should be able, once we categorize and formalize those skills, inshallah, you'll be able to use them really almost immediately. And then I will be teaching some of the taboo topics. So these are topics like domestic violence, these are topics like binge eating, and some other disorders that we have in the community, but they're usually not addressed, or they're not addressed by people that are qualified to speak about them. So inshallah, I will be discussing some of those, and Sister Sarah will be covering the rest of them.
Some of the things that you can expect to cover here are some of the fundamentals of mental health and psychology, especially in terms of how it intertwines with Islam. There's also going to be a lot of practical skills to apply in your personal lives that can, inshallah, lead to better mental wellness. This is everything from understanding the link between your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, understanding how and why to control our responses in different situations, understanding how to reframe our thought process and deal with different struggles in a healthier and more beneficial way, inshallah, as well as how our mental health can really be intertwined with our faith. Along with this, we're also going to be talking about a lot of what are considered quote-unquote taboo subjects in our community that tend to be difficult to talk about in the Muslim community. And that's going to be everything from trauma to grief to same-sex attraction to bullying to suicide and self-harming behaviors. And of course, we'll also give a lot of tips and techniques with regards to how to help yourself if you're struggling with any of these, and how to help others if you know others struggling with these, as well as how to access the resources that you need to, inshallah, begin the healing journey. All of the topics that we're going to be covering are going to be covered from the perspective of real psychological research, real techniques that I would use with my clients in a therapeutic setting, right, in the therapy room, and then also based on the Quran and Sunnah and incorporating Islam so that we can see that intersection between mental wellness, Islam, therapy, and psychology. By the end of this course, our hope for you is that, inshallah, you're going to have the tools to be much more self-aware in terms of what changes you need to make in order to attain positive growth. But realize also that that's not the end, right? It's up to you what you're going to gain from this course and what you're choosing to implement. If you come in here with the mentality that I am seeking positive change and I'm seeking the knowledge in order to take the first steps to make that change, that's what you'll get, inshallah. But if this is just information that's going to be tucked away, then positive change isn't going to be possible without the effort that you're going to be putting in on your end. So my piece of advice for you in taking this course is not to try and actually do it all in one sitting or two sittings. I'd recommend that you take it piece by piece, and with every module that you study, take a little bit of time for self-reflection. Try and think, how much of what was shared really applies to me? Is there anything that I gained from the tips and advice provided that I can try and start implementing today? I'd encourage you to write notes, but not just notes in terms of what's being said, but notes in terms of what resonates with you and what particularly applies to your life and how you can improve in terms of yourself, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your relationship with others in your life, and how you can use these tips and techniques in order to begin implementing that.
By the end of the seminar, the viewer will be able to speak briefly about Islamic mental health within the Islamic tradition. They will also be able to understand common issues that are facing the community, and will be able to have resources to address those concerns. think the ultimate manifestation would be that by being cognizant of the various issues, they're almost, they probably have people in their family, friends, people they're around that are suffering from those things. And so they will be able to approach them in a way and not make them feel like they are being dismissed or not understanding their struggle, and really ultimately help them maybe take a step towards getting the help that they deserve. As we're learning about these various disorders or these different topics, to maybe take it to their community leaders and organizations that they're a part of to kind of help raise awareness so that it moves beyond just one person and it really becomes a community effort to be able to kind of remove this stigma around mental health. That would be like the ultimate sort of goal that they could do. So before you start this course, think about, what do you know about mental health and the Islamic tradition? Anything that you can think of, whether it's ayat, whether it's hadith, and maybe make some notes on that. And then at the end of this course, see what you can fill in. And if somebody asked you the question, what does Islam say about mental health? What is the answer you can give right now with what you know? And at the end of this course, how will you be able to answer that question? Secondly, when someone asks you about, and they say, my friend is depressed, or my brother-in-law drinks, or has a drug problem and nobody wants to talk about it, how would you practically address these issues? How would you go about approaching them? How would you approach their family? How would you approach the community? How would you do that right now? Make a note of how you would do it now, and then inshallah, after this course is over, how would that approach be different, if it would be?
In order to figure out how you're progressing in the course, there are a few things to keep in mind. Number one is you're going to be able to start to troubleshoot and zone in on the areas of your life that you realize that you need improvement. That's called self-awareness, right? You're going to be more aware of the things that you need to change. And the second part of it is being able to use the practical tips and techniques that we talk about in order to figure out small and consistent steps that you can slowly but surely take to result in making the changes that you want to those issues in your life.
Where are we getting this information and why these sources?
Everything that I'm going to be sharing with you are things that I either use in sessions with clients that I have found to be very effective in evoking change and in beginning the journey toward healing and making the changes that we want in our lives. Also, everything that we discuss in terms of psychology and tips and techniques and the science behind things, all of that is research-based. And all of that can be found in research. And then, of course, when it comes to the Islamic component, everything is found in the Quran and Sunnah in terms of the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has encouraged us to seek mental wellness and the way that Rasulullah has also guided us in doing that as well.
So when I started a position as a religious director at the masjid that I'm at, people come to imams, they come to the resident scholar, they come with challenges that they're facing in their lives. And sometimes those challenges are really complex, and as clergy, we don't have answers to those questions. Or we answer them in a way that could actually do more harm than good. And that's very serious, right, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I remember I had a mentor who served as an imam, and he also was a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so he said what used to happen is that he would have community members come to him, and he could only take them so far, right? The spiritual aspect is crucial, and it is one aspect, but we also have other tools, and he just wasn't able to use them. So to kind of blend the spiritual with the science, he went and he studied mental health and became a licensed marriage and family therapist, and that just made him so much more effective when dealing with the community. So after I did my kind of Islamic education and returned in my position, then I basically followed the same path. Now, I waited 1 year because, of course, you got to wait for the in-state tuition. So I waited a year, and then I enrolled and I did a master's in mental health. Now, when I went into that, when I started it, I thought I'm going to be like the only, not even Muslim, like person of religious belief, and I'm just going to be on the defensive the whole time, and everybody's just going to be attacking me. And early on, like in the first class, actually, very early on, the instructor, he said, introduce yourselves, because the classes are very small, right? 10 people, sometimes less. Introduce yourself and tell us what you do. And so he says, so I said, my name is Omar Husain, and I'm clergy at a masjid, a local masjid here. Or I said religious director. I was trying to be slick. And he's like, because that is the official title I had. He's like, oh, so you're an imam, right? And everybody's head kind of turned and looked at me, because everybody was, when they were introducing themselves, they're like, okay, my name is Bob, I work at the methadone clinic. My name is Susie, I work with eating disorders. It was just kind of the standard sort of. So they all kind of looked at me, and then they looked back. And then he's like, do you see any conflict between your religious beliefs and studying counseling? And I said, no, like without hesitation. I'm like, no. And he just kind of pauses, and he's like, yeah, I guess I don't either. Now, what's interesting is that he is I guess he's one of the like secular humanists, right? Secular humanist. And he has since then, I've kept in contact with him since that class. And he's written me recommendation letters and whatnot. And so I started learning, and I was like, oh, this is kind of good. So they're actually, of course, it's not framed Islamically, but it was kind of this, like, you kind of do your thing and we respect you for whatever you do. Of course, as Muslims, the problem is they just, whatever you want to do, everything is, and that's fine, they can do their own thing. But they were going to tell me what I can and cannot do, generally speaking. And so I was like, okay, alhamdulillah. So I started to go through the classes, and I was really enjoying it. And then I started to take some of that material and implement it into like durus and khutbas, right, in lessons and sermons. So I had things like for example, the very famous 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you don't know what that is, whenever you've seen a movie and everybody's sitting around and somebody says, my name is Bob, and everybody says, hi, Bob, that's the 12 steps, right? So I made like a Muslim 12 steps, and I made it over multiple weeks. And then I would, talk about other like myths of mental health. And the thought was, when you have someone who's kind of a religious figure speaking to these things, there's a credibility that they have, and they can see that it's not against the teachings of Islam. So I started to kind of, I pursued that, alhamdulillah, graduated, and then decided to keep going and entered a doctoral program, and just kind of got more engrossed into it and really took pride in kind of being like the Muslim representative in the program. And, just continued to learn more. And because I think I came in with an Islamic studies sort of a background, I was kind of able to decipher and siphon out things that work Islamically and that don't work. And so that's how this material came to be. So it was like, how can we benefit the community while kind of filtering out what doesn't need to be in there? And then, of course, that was, I just kind of started combining it, reading more about from Western sources, from the Islamic tradition, and that's kind of the lens at how I look at things now, kind of psychologically and mental health and holistically as well. So I don't just preach the psychological part. I'm also big kind of on like physical fitness and things like that, because you have to have all these different components. And so that all of that is kind of a culmination of the material that we have here. What we found sometimes is that Muslims go and they get this training, but there's not really much Islam to their mental health approach. And that can be problematic at times. Like at times it can be really problematic. So you have to be able to kind of decipher that. So inshallah, the goal of this course was to give that framework from kind of people who are in that Islamic side, as well as kind of the academic and the actual mental health field, and combine them so that people can benefit, inshallah, and kind of remove the misconceptions that they may have. The practical aspects that we teach in this course, they're based off of research. It's not just coming up with it off the top of our head. It's based off continuing research. Research also, it's kind of, it's a field that I'm actively involved in. And so we're taking kind of the best of that research and then taking the Islamic tradition as well. Now, we don't need Western psychology to prove anything about Islam. We don't need anything to prove anything about Islam. But, they don't have to navigate independently. They absolutely can work together. So this is real research. And I think one of the things that is really nice about this course is you have kind of professionals in the field as well as those kind of with that Islamic background. And that's not something which you always get in a course like this.
So education in any context is really important, but especially when it comes to education about ourselves and things that directly impact our everyday life and our everyday relationships and our everyday faith situations. That type of education and knowledge is really important. Whenever I've worked with clients and, for example, talked to them about the link between their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, or how identifying an unhealthy thinking pattern can suddenly make them so much more aware of what's going through their mind and then give them the power and the ability to be able to change that. The transformation is really amazing, subhanAllah. And so whenever I've worked with someone and then talked to them about this particular link between the way that we think and the way that we feel and the way that we act, once that starts to click, and once that starts to be implemented in terms of actively working on our thought process, the transformation is just really amazing to behold. Suddenly, the way that they view the person that they've lived with, their spouse, for the past several years, suddenly that changes. The way that they relate to people at their job, that changes. The way they interpret the idea of going to work every day, that changes. And the way that they feel toward acts of worship, the way that they think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their relationship with Him, that changes too. So just as a recap of everything that we've talked about, what we're going to cover in this course is going to be everything from the fundamentals of mental wellness from a psychological and Islamic perspective.
History of mental health from a Western perspective, and then really more so from an Islamic perspective. Then we're going to talk about common myths in mental health, and we're going to have a section on mental health myths specifically for men.
All the way through practical techniques that you can implement right away.
After that, we'll move into relational skills. So we have that's the practical aspect of this course, where we will actually talk about certain skills that can be implemented to immediately improve our communication and connection with others, and ultimately with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
All the way until taboo topics that people typically don't talk about, but we really need to, and figuring out how to deal with those topics.
This course will help you kind of improve yourself, just in terms of psychologically. This is not just designed for people with serious mental issues. This is general psychological health. The approach is more of sort of a positive psychological approach rather than a disorder or this is wrong with someone. We'll cover those separately. But we really want to stress that the mental health is for all of us at whatever capacity it may be. And then just understanding the richness of the Islamic tradition and how absolutely mental health has always been a part of the Islamic tradition, and then covering mental health overall from a lens of the Quran, the Sunnah, and also just modern psychological approaches. So with that, we kind of package it all together, and that composes this course.
One of the things that I really have as a goal for all of you as you attend this course is just to make the small, incredibly important changes in your lives that will lead to a more fulfilling future and more fulfilling relationships with others around you, and primarily with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ultimately, the benefit to your daily lives is to be able to gain more self-awareness in terms of the changes that you need in order to lead a better life and to have more mental wellness, as well as the ways and the practical tips and techniques that you need in order to be able to go about gaining that, inshallah.